Um, Recently, I had my first experience with a blood infection. I
Hmm.
got barely a scratch on my knuckle from a beef spine bone that was just hanging in the aging cooler. And that night, I had weird pink tracer lines going up my arm. So I went to the hospital, and he's like, "You've got a blood infection," and I was on intravenous antibiotics for 5 days.
Good cutting enhances the quality of good meat. In his way, the meat cutter is an artist. Poor cutting results in an inferior piece of meat, regardless of quality.
What up, meatheads? This is Travis, American Butcher, and in this episode of the Meat Block Podcast, Ryan had the amazing opportunity to interview Jeff Senger, Senger, and I recommend going to his Instagram account and following him because it is one of the most beautiful and bold accounts out there for the butcher and slaughter industry. It's rich and it's raw, and I love it. And I think you're going to really enjoy this interview. I'm always interested in how people come to this career. Sometimes it's passed on by generation. Sometimes it's just people wanting to know that simple question of where does their food come down or come from, and then it ends up getting them to go down a rabbit hole. And next thing you know, they're a farmsteader or they're a butcher. So without any further delay, here's Ryan interviewing Jeff.
I'm always curious about how people arrive and what their path is to this butchering career, this butchering profession. For me, it felt like I describe it as falling through a trap door a little bit into a butchering career, meaning there's a series of events that unfolded, and kind of before I knew it, I was on this path and I was deep into the butchering career, whereas that hadn't necessarily been my objective. But everyone gets here differently. Some people grow up in a shop and it's their stated intention from a young age to become a slaughterman or to become a butcher, meat cutter, this kind of thing. So I'm wondering if you could speak to your route to this line of work and how you got here.
Sure, yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on the podcast here, Ryan. Yeah, no, mine is more unusual than most. I think I started my route into butchery started with professional accounting. I was in a I went to school and got good grades and all that, and went on to university to study accounting and worked as an accountant for kind of climbed the ladder and worked my way up. Worked for some big corporations at a high level of accounting, and that built sort of the sufficient anger and rage inside me in order to become a slaughterist. I think I joke about that. So, but in the background, from when I was a little kid, my dad hunted. We grew up in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada here, and Dad always hunted moose for a week or two every fall, and I looked forward to him coming home with something, deer and moose, but mostly just moose from in the field. And I was the kid standing around in the garage with all the cigarette smoke, helping them butcher the moose after they hung for a while in the garage at our house. And so I kind of had this closet hobby of butchery and doing things outdoors like hunting and fishing, and I really enjoyed that. So I was going through kind of the regular formal school, sorts of things that your parents want you to do, and landed these pretty cool accounting jobs. But in the fall, I'd go hunting and find something to shoot, and then put it up myself and cure and cook and all that stuff. Um, Around, I don't know how old we were. My wife and I got married, I guess, at age 20, in my 20s there, and was living in Calgary, and we had our first kid, and decided that growing up in Calgary, we just it wasn't a good fit as working for oil and gas accounting, and we just didn't see ourselves getting into the kind of debt that we would need to get into to have a reasonable house in the city of Calgary, sort of the southern part of Alberta. And that was in around 2008 when property prices around the West were really, really high, but in our province they were high. And I joked with my wife that if if we moved to a very poor third world country, then we could live. Then we're kind of officially retired at 26. We've met the requirements because we had just lucked out by owning a property in a place where the property values went up like crazy. So we had a lot of equity, and so I was just joking that we could pull the plug on this corporate lifestyle and just live off the land and all that kind of stuff. So we were kind of looking in places like Nicaragua, looking at just office daydreaming. And then after a few months of that, I found the very poor third world country that we would move to, and that was rural Alberta. And Alberta, a lot like lots of states and provinces, the rural areas are people are migrating to the cities. There aren't the average age is probably where we live now is probably in their people are in their 60s here. Not a lot of people taking up farming or agriculture or anything like that. So that was the first step. We left. I quit my job, and I remember a manager walked me around the office tower, and just saying like, "What's wrong with you? Are you sure you're okay upstairs?" But we said no. We've got this kid. We probably want to raise it ourselves. We joke, but a lot of the folks that we worked with in Calgary and downtown office culture were pretty proud that their kids were being raised by Filipino nannies. And I remember I was at some party or something, and these office workers that I was a part of, and they said that they're concerned because their kids were developing Filipino accents because they were raised by Filipino nannies. And I was like, wow, this is sort of the least genuine place on the planet for what is important to us, So fast forward a few years, and I was still working as an accountant, but we had bought a quarter section of land. That's 160 acres of farmland, kind of like an hour and a half out of Edmonton, like a major city with 1 million people or more, for very, very little. Like, it was a big house on a lot of land. And I mean, the land here in Alberta hasn't even been broke for that long. It's only been, recovered from the aspen boreal forest, for less than 100 years. But this was an old farm, and old farm in Alberta standards. So there's some old buildings on the farm that were used for like a 1940s, 1950s hog operation. So there's a cinder block or breeze block building that was used to produce pigs. And we talked to some of the neighbors around here, and they said, oh yeah, they used to grow some pigs, and they used to have some poultry in this other kind of rundown building. So that the house was new, but the outbuildings were just sort of sitting there, and that drove me nuts. So as I worked during the day in a small town for forestry and other companies, our gateway livestock were laying hens. And so I remember I talked to one of the people that I worked with, and they had laying hens to get rid of. We got a few hens, and that sort of started the decline into us as livestock owner managers. And for us, I think the reason and the purpose and the big discovery was that food could be that much better. So with 6 hens eating their eggs, you could notice that there are changes significant changes in the quality of the eggs, depending on what the hens were up to, depending on what they're eating, and seasonally as well. So taking care of your cat or dog, as a kid growing up, didn't affect you that much. Like what they ate. I mean, it was great when pets have energy, pets are happy, or shiny coats and all that stuff. But it's quite different when you were relying on them for food, and so the health of the animal and the feed of the animal was interesting to us. So when the neighbors told us that the old cinder block building had been used for pigs, we thought, well, how hard could pigs be? And we found out the hard way on every species that we've had on the farm since, that we had to do a lot of reading and then a lot of learning and then a lot of crying. We cried until there were no more tears, because there's a lot of sadness and tragedy in livestock. So so that was we had some hobby animals on the farm on this big chunk of land here, and but still butchery was distant. I was busy being an accountant, kind of hoping to get out of that at some point, because it was a bit just depressing working in an office for me. And our neighbor had invited me. There's a small town close to here called Sangudo, and a neighbor invited me to an economic committee meeting, because Sangudo, a town of 300, was slow, a ghost town. Main Street there's a lot of buildings boarded up, and so it looks like a lot of rural small town Alberta, that net migration out and businesses closing and all that. She said that we don't have a finance person sort of on our committee, So come talk to our committee about money ideas and maybe, see what you can do, because we don't want Sangudo to go away. It's got a grocery store and a gas station. So I started kind of working with that committee in my free time, evenings and weekends, and we decided to build Alberta's first and Western Canada's first a cooperative that would finance other cooperatives. So in areas where corporations don't want to be because there may be profit, but there's not enough profit, there comes this history of co-op. So I read all about the cooperative economic structure, the way to organize a business, and so it became my project, this cooperative project, in that I just really wanted to learn about it. I thought it was really cool, and the group, sort of this economic group, thought it was cool too. So we all sort of pulled together and we said, well, what does the town need most of all? And it needs one of everything. But first, it needs to not lose the existing businesses. One of the key businesses in town, and the most significant, I guess, aside from maybe the school and the liquor store, liquor store is an important one, of which there are several. In a town of 300, I think there are 3 liquor stores.
Okay.
As with most small towns, I think.
Yeah.
But the slaughterhouse, I'm getting there. So the slaughterhouse was this sort of relic from the past. There was a guy that had been working there since the 1970s, I guess. And it was sort of this old derelict building with smashed-in windows and just in a poor state of repair. A lot of townspeople actually weren't sure that it was open and operating because the guy who owned it was just down to him. Employees were just down to himself and one meat wrapper. And we determined that the co-op could finance something like that we could, mostly made up of ranchers. We could put our money together in a pot, and we could buy this piece of living history in the town of Sangudo to meet a mandate that our cooperative had set up, like mission statements and mandates. As a community, as a group of people, we said it's important to not lose businesses. It's important to keep business, to attract and retain businesses that serve the agricultural community. It's important to keep our youngsters so that young people that grow up on the farms around here don't just immediately have to go, move to the city and disappear. So to create some jobs would be a good idea. And the next step was, well, who would run this thing? And so I'm kind of staying quiet because I'm a closet butcher. I'm at home. I've got a few pigs running around now, some turkeys, lambs. We've got 3 kids, 3.5 kids or something on the ground at the farm.
Mm-hmm.
And
you mean like human kids?
Underwear. Yeah, human kids as well. Yeah,
as opposed to goats.
Yeah, we decided why not? Have a few more to help out with all the animals. And we like kids. They're okay. But I'm curing bacons and hams in a slap together smoker in my underwear in the backyard. It's like a pretty serious hobby. So we're at this meeting talking about, well, we want to retain this slaughterhouse in town, the slaughterhouse and meat shop in the town, but who would run it? And so I'm kind of thinking, man, it would be so cool. Like, slaughterhouses are so, the idea, it's nostalgic. So I started putting together some spreadsheets, as was my nature at the time. And well, if he charges, some just early, kind of looking at it from a business point of view, I'm like, well, it could make reasonable money. And if I worked there and didn't have to drive as far to the next, the town where I was working at this pulp mill and then eventually a power plant, if I wasn't driving 45 minutes a day each way, and my clothing budget would be down, and anyway, clothing and eating out. So there weren't those options in Sangudo at the slaughterhouse. So I thought this could be an okay business. So myself and another guy that were attending the new investment co-op meetings, we were just talking sort of at the break, and he said that he did a job that he couldn't stand. He was a plumber, pipe fitter, working for a maintenance company on contract, and he didn't like it. And I said, yeah, I'm an accountant, and it makes me a bit suicidal, to be honest. And he said, well, would you be interested? And I said, yeah, I'm thinking about this because I like sausage and I like the curing end of things. So life's short. And he said, me too. Oh, and the other thing about this was Kevin Meyer was his name. He had a meat cutting ticket from when he was 17. It was the first thing he did out of high school because his stepdad had owned the grocery store in Sangudo quite a few years ago. He was just a couple years older than me, but and he worked the meat counter at this little grocery store that had since been completely mothballed. It's just got packaged meats there now, but he'd done some meat cutting anyway, and I had done some curing. So we stepped up after the break and said to the investment co-op, if the investment co-op would support us, we think that we'd give it a stab and be the business owners and run the slaughterhouse. And that was 8 years ago. So the old fella Ivan stayed on for this old German, as is the case sometimes. I don't know. Maybe is it like that in the States too? These German and Swiss guys,
I think
butchers usually,
it's
Slavic guys, or
I think it's regional. In the area I'm living in now, there's a large Dutch community, so there's a lot of guys from the Netherlands who are, third and fourth generation butchers and such. And I think it's just based on whatever the kind of popular immigrant group in that region is. They'll bring their the traditions from their countries, and
that makes sense. It's funny in Alberta. It's always this old German guy, or sometimes this old Swiss guy. That's who those are the people that had set up in these small communities, and like every 50 kilometers, every 30 miles or whatever. There's a town with 200 or 300 people in it, and it used to have a provincially inspected slaughterhouse to service the local sort of catchment basin of cattle producers, mostly cattle producers.
Mm-hmm.
And in our area, in the 8 years that we've owned this place, Sangudo Custom Meat Packers, the local area abattoirs have been shutting down like they've just been dropping like flies. There aren't a lot of people that want to get into this line of work, and there really aren't a lot of young people that are in rural communities. And the nature of the work, as you know, is it's quite physically demanding, as well as you have to be reasonably good at running a business because the margins aren't like they are in other industries. They're tighter margins.
Yeah, very tight.
So back at Sangudo Meats there 8 years ago, it was Kevin Meyer, myself, and this is funny, and the lady that came free with purchase, her name was Lori, and we called her Dirty Lori because she had the dirtiest mind of any woman in her mid-50s that I'd ever met. So Dirty Lori, Kevin, and I ran ran Sangudo Custom Meat Packers, and we killed. I don't remember. I think we killed Fridays and then cut meat Monday to Thursday, and kind of learned the ropes of everything from the beginning, from unloading animals up until making bacons and jerky and stuff like that. In a kind of in this industrial, I don't know, in bigger than your backyard, bigger than just hunting. When I first walked in, I had never even seen a pig on a rail before. When I walked in to make the offer to purchase, I was walking around the cooler and stuff, and there's this hog hanging. And I was like, "Look at that! That's amazing! How do you get the skin so smooth like that?" And he just laughed at me.
So you have the backing of the co-op, the financial backing, and stated intention to do something for the community that's going to keep existing businesses there, such as the farming community, to do this effort that's going to support the farming infrastructure that's already existing in rural Alberta, in the region you're in, and around Sangudo. And then you and this other gentleman who had a little bit of experience with meat cutting, you kind of get this wild hair to be the owner-operators, and you take the plunge. And then and this is on top of the plunge that you and your wife and family had already taken to move to this rural region. Tell me about, as in these kind of early days of as you're taking the plunge into Sangudo Custom Meat Packers, what are some of the signs that affirm for you that you're doing the right thing and that you're like, this is it, this is as opposed to maybe some of the doubt that comes up when we do these big kind of drastic life changes?
That's hilarious. Yeah, the signs that we're doing the right thing. There weren't signs that we were doing the right thing. It was there were so many things that went wrong, and maybe I mean, so there's the story that there wasn't a plumbing fixture, there wasn't a hinge or a latch or a pin there wasn't a screw that didn't need tightening on that plant. Like the handling system for the animals was like um, horse panels, and the animals would try and kill us. There'd be fight or flight. Like so we knew immediately that it wasn't even designed right, Ryan. Like there were these comical, now I guess comical, but where we were just fighting for our lives in the pens just to move the animals up. So in the olden days here, 8 years ago, it would take us 20 minutes to get a beef up into the knock box to shoot. And now it takes 18 minutes to get the animal from the pens into the cooler. So there's a really steep learning curve, but also we've done something like $200,000 or $300,000 worth of work in the back, and like I'd say 90% of that was built around animal handling. And maybe I'm kind of jumping ahead, but so I guess that the bait or the hook at that place and at this endeavor is one, not to fail and not to let the community down. So the positives were that the community kept patting us on our backs and saying, yeah, you're doing a good job, and we know it's hard, but we're behind you, and we believe that you can do it. But it was a battle with the inanimate building. It sort of had a life, and it was going to teach us from like a pipe to the face. I remember early on I was in the speed walk because there was a problem with the splitting saw, and it's got a counterweight in back in the pens. So I was like speed walking from the front, the kill floor where the saw was all hung up, and speed walking into the barns, and forgot to duck at this like 5'6" pipe that clocked me right in the eye and knocked me all. My vision narrowed, and I just saw these little pinpricks of light when I hit the concrete, and there was blood pouring out of my face, and Kevin said he heard this sack of shit hit the concrete, and he thought like that's bad. So they came running over, and him and old Ivan stood me up, and we got back to the kill floor and just kept killing. We just kept, there's blood pouring out, and Ivan, this crotchety old German, he's like, "Get back to work! What the fuck are you doing?" Like, so there are lots of pain, like learning curves, and a lot of growing pains to get through. But I would say that I think what kept us on it was sort of, we had these advocates through our arrangement, our unique financial arrangement with the cooperative. We had advocates in the community. There were 22 initial investors, and they became sort of an ad hoc sales force to give these new young idiots a try. So, we weren't the old traditional guy. We're cutting in different ways. We treated and handled the animals in different ways. So we didn't just reach for the spark wand or the cattle prod as soon as things didn't go our way. Like, so we took our time. We're a little bit soft, a little bit more modern. But the 22 or 23 initial investors that were all sort of cattle money, or cattle families,
sure,
cattle producing ag families. They said, no, give these guys a try. And so our kill book filled up, and it wasn't like we made money at all, but the first few years we had lots and lots of work, and I think that the local community sort of forgave us our inability, and then the philosophy too was just if they weren't happy, just fix it. So just pay the price of fixing things that weren't what the customers wanted, and there was a lot of that. So redo it, buy the meat and then repurpose it. So this isn't cut right. I'm mad. Okay, well, we could buy that beef from you if if things escalated and things are really bad, we'll just pay you a market price plus a premium, and then we could grind it and put it out in the deli counter as sausage or something like that. So I like that about meat, in that you could always downcycle if you were really in a pinch, and if you were creative. So we learned the skills of being ultimately creative to hold on to what little margin there is in that business. So we learned to problem solve in ways that we didn't think that we could. Right from keeping the refrigeration going, and then mechanical. It's been an amazing journey. We need to learn electrical and plumbing, and or Kevin had this background in plumbing, but a lot of it we just look at how things had been band-aided over like patchwork over patchwork, and we laughed. So, and the fact that there were two of us there with a good sense of humor, like we laughed at ourselves and our failures every day, dozens of times a day. And then normally the way to get through would be to mimic a lot of the people that, so mimicking and making parodies of the whole thing in the back on the cut floor. That was the banter, or on the kill floor. We just banter about, I didn't get the right meat. I didn't get all my meat back. You stole my meat. I listened to one of the other podcasts had something like that. Like I think it was the Mangalitsa story. This can't be my meat. This isn't my meat. I brought in a way bigger pig.
Right.
So by having two of us there, it kind of made it easier. And then we set about hiring staff for the jobs that we disliked the most, and got up to like 7 full-time staff kind of within the last, that was maybe in year 3 or 4. We had 6, 7, 8 people. So a janitor was number 1, and like getting the pressure washer to clean down, like blow everything down, that was number 2. The janitors probably are. The pressure washer has won Employee of the Month more times than any other human staff.
Nice.
Because the pressure washer that's the coolest machine.
Yeah.
I'd say that's the most important machine in any butcher shop is probably the pressure washer. Because after you're done cutting meat, 15 hours, you do not want to use a soap and rag or soapy rag to clean shit down.
So you and Kevin, sounds like you guys have just enough piss and vinegar, just enough kind of wind in your sails, and just enough backing from the community to kind of weather the storms that you're experiencing in those early years. I think some butcher shops can be a little bit more, it's our way or the highway, and there ends up being a tension between your farming customer base and the butchers, and that tension can be strong in certain places. And it sounds like there's a very collaborative spirit you guys are coming into it with the community. Are you filling in your skill set, the holes in your skill set, through learning from Ivan, or are you kind of tapping into other resources to fill in the holes? Or did you guys come into it with just enough skill set where it was more just about learning efficiencies and streamlining the system?
Oh, yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting to just contemplate and be asked here, 8 years on, these sorts of questions. So thanks. But it's multidimensional. Like, there was this skill building for meat cutting, right? Skill building for slaughter. Those things happened, absolutely on the job, but I was gobbling up as many butchery books, At Home and Basic Butchering, and I'm not good with remembering names, but you could edit this out. Like Kriansky or something like that. There was.
Okay.
Can you say that name? That was in the one that these old anyway, Kriansky, some guy in America, right?
I might recognize the cover of the book, but I'm not. That name's not ringing a bell for me.
Okay. And it was a classic. It was written in the 70s or 80s or something like that. But these sorts of Bibles. So we went back to the treasure trove of, and funny because butchers aren't, they're not huge writers. They're not real literary greats. So there's not a lot on the shelf that you could buy or order in. But anyway, so I was reading and just gobbling up a lot of books, really in the world of curing and sausage. The Rollman books, charcuterie and salumi, and those were really essential. And then the books that came from like the Meat Hook and I don't know what else we have. American publications, Olympic Provisions, or
sure,
when it was Olympic Provisions, So we're just sort of buying these, and it was a cross section of books from, the restaurant trade and with the meat focus, and then the butcher trade, which was a little scanty. The slaughter trade was the hardest to find anything, or very much written, that wasn't from government, government publications. And then probably more than Ivan, the old owner, because he was one of those, it's my way or the highway, and I do it right. Even though we would question, well, why do you do it that way? And he would say, because it's the right way. We learned a lot hands-on on the kill floor from the meat inspectors. So every kill day, there's a meat inspector there, just one of them, from when we start to when we finish. And they circulate around all of the provincial abattoirs, of which there are 12 maybe in Alberta. And Alberta is huge. So 12 to 20, I would say, something like that.
Okay.
And they're really helpful and good. provided good snippets of knowledge and could show us in practical terms how to, just tricks with your knife and things to make the process go faster.
Nice.
And then in addition to that, I found this an archive of videos online from the USDA that talked about maximizing, beef cuts and maximizing pork, pork profit and pork cuts. So YouTube 8 years ago was useful, and it's only gotten better. So connecting with the outside world, like the small community of butchers around the English-speaking butchers, and you can even watch videos from other countries where you don't understand what the hell they're saying, but you can look at a technique with a knife or a technique, even cooking techniques, which I'm really into. Where does the animal go ultimately, and then how are those cuts used in other cultures? And so drawing on that has made us more respectful for the for whole animal butchery, and then getting the most that we can out of it. Because with a handful really of cooking techniques, you can make the shank as delicious as you can make the boneless prime rib.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question. So we learn from many sources, and I think that I think surrendering to our own frickin' ignorance, like surrendering to the fact that everyone knows more than us. I think that was the key to learning, like just being a forever student, and that every challenge is an opportunity to learn. It sounds pretty cliche, but it was never more clear than in running your own business.
Awesome. And I love hearing that the inspectors provided an education for you guys too. I love hearing that, the influence of some good inspectors. So in the United States, it would be USDA inspected facilities, and inspectors would come through. I'm hearing what sounds like provincial inspector would be the name that you guys are using, or the type of inspector.
Two types of plants: provincially inspected and then federally inspected.
Okay.
We're a provincial inspected plant where volumes are like sub 20 beef a week. The federal plants, there are way fewer of those. They would do several thousand in a shift. So that's HACCP and HACCP certified, big money, and they would have 22 to 32 inspectors per shift, 2,000 workers, several thousand beef. So there are a couple in this province, way down in the south, of federally inspected plants, but more, maybe 24 provincially inspected plants that just serve the local area, really.
Okay.
The difference being that provincially inspected meat can't be shipped interprovincially. Federally inspected meat can go anywhere, but provincially inspected can't cross borders.
Gotcha. Yeah, that sounds very similar to the USDA setup that in the United States. Some questions about scale. So you're provincially inspected. You're approximately sub 20 beef per week. Why this particular niche within the abattoir slaughter world? Why not a more mega plant like the federally inspected mega meatpacking facility? Is this scale one that you guys are comfortable with? Or are you trying to drive your scale higher than it currently is? Where are you at with sort of like a appropriate scale for what you guys are trying to do?
No, that's another excellent question, Ryan. Here's where I get on my soapbox. So I feel really strongly about the more I learned about contemporary meat processing and animal production, the more I realized how important the scale of plant that we had bought was to the food economy, to the food system that was in the business of producing food. At a certain scale, and it's not that far above our scale, the food stops becoming food and as a community sustainable resource, and becomes a commodity really quickly. So food is commodified very shortly after a small provincial abattoir scale of plant. So I've said in other speaking engagements, many small distributed is the path forward to healthy food, in this case healthy meat. But we and we learned through anecdotal stories, conversations with the meat inspectors, kind of learning things the hard way about why that happens to be true. and even more so with meat than with than with other food products. It's difficult to build a kind of a wholesome, clean, well treated and well put up meat product. I think once scale starts to get a bit out of control or crazy. So handling big numbers of animals, like very, very large numbers of animals in the thousands in a single day, makes stress on the animals. Having a disassembly line that has thousands of workers and makes tens of thousands of dollars per minute means that there's a kind of stress and pressure that isn't conducive to moving animals humanely, moving animals safely, and having a safe and hygienic work environment for the workers. The number of workers at large scale are difficult to, I want to say, police, train, educate, and sort of keep them, doing their very best at a certain scale. So I'll give an example. On our kill floor, there would be 3 workers. If you just think about, I'm a numbers guy, so there are 3 workers to 1 inspector, and the total number of beef in this example we'd be working on processing, gutting and skinning, is 1. So 1 inspector, 3 workers. One of the workers is the owner of the plant. So we have all of those sets of eyeballs looking at the carcass for signs of contamination. Any imperfection is cleaned up and dealt with immediately, because the inspector is one of the 4 people looking at the one carcass, and she or he has 18 minutes, 20 minutes to look at that carcass. So each captive bolt stun blow to the head on the animal, moving the animal up, the inspector is there for all steps of the process, as is the owner of the plant, as are only a couple of workers. To contrast that, so what I'm saying is the animals they go into the cooler clean, and the process is maybe slow, but they're clean, hygienic, and I don't know, palatable, I would say. If you move to large scale plants, and a lot of our inspectors actually our provincial inspectors have worked in the federal plants, right? So these are career meat inspectors, and so we hear stories and watch the news about problems when you scale up. And if you have 2,200 workers on shift, you have 2,200 workers on shift, you're processing 5,000 beef in an 8-hour day, and there are only 22 inspectors at that plant for that day. The ratio of inspectors to workers and inspectors to head of beef processed goes down dramatically. Also, there's an incentive to not stop the line when you're making $10,000 a second or whatever, some absurd an absurd disassembly plant. They're making a lot of money. So any inspector, anyone rational would be, you'd really have to swallow hard to reach up and press and punch the red button to stop the line and just put 2,200 workers on pause because you saw some shit hit the ass end of a cow when the hide is pulled off. So a lot of that, and then, man, you just listen to the news and sort of read things in the industry. There are a lot of steps that happen at those plants to safeguard against contamination and foodborne illness, because they know that the hygiene just isn't going to catch it. So we get weird informational circulars at these little plants, like for those plants that are spraying the carcasses with a deadly toxin as they not deadly. I should not be so, but dramatic. But for those of you who are spraying the carcasses in your cooler, make sure nobody eats that within any sooner than 3 days. So this is lactic acid spraying of carcasses, right? So we know there's shit on the carcass. We're just going to spray. We know there's bacteria on the carcass that could come from contamination, which is all nice words for there's shit on the carcass, sure enough. So you spray it down with an acid or a denaturing agent. But that denaturing agent was making people really, really sick if they ate it within 3 days of it being sprayed on the carcass. So this circular, I'm reading all this and kind of reading between the lines about what goes on in the big plants. After a huge E. coli, or I think it was a listeria outbreak, was the latest. They shut down the slaughter at the federal plant, and all of us little provincial guys were like listening carefully, like, well, we don't want that to happen to us. And they're installing kind of a cook step where each carcass that may have contamination on the outside of it that's been handled by thousands of people, it goes through a cook step where it goes down a hallway where it's steamed with high temperature steam. to cook like a millimeter or two on the outside of the carcass that then some other worker has to shave off with a deli slicer. So that's their way, either trading with chemicals, radiation, or heat to cook the outside of each carcass. Was one idea to sort of neutralize the Listeria or E. coli that's endemic to cattle and food produced on assembly lines, so huge where you just can't watch what 2,200 people are doing after they go to the bathroom. Then back to our little wholesome little slaughterhouse on the prairie. There are 3 people, so we know each other's bathroom routines, and it's not hard to police the washing of hands. Just basic hygiene and things like that is quite easy to manage at the small scale. So we're absolutely our profit levels are completely unappealing and unattractive to a mega multinational corporation, but we all get a reasonable amount of pay for a lot of physical work. But punch your card Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. You live in the community. You're close to home, close to your kids. Your kids can come to work with you. You're providing a service to the community, and we're not driving miles and miles to get to work. So it's all of it is quite reasonable, and then the food product that we produce is is at a quality that I want to say that can't be beat, but it's difficult to match when you have millions of dollars of infrastructure and thousands of people handling that carcass. So I shake the hand of the guy who drops off the beef or the hog or whatever when he drops off, and I see how he handles the pigs coming off the trailer, and then I shake his hand when he comes to pick up the boxes with the meat inside those boxes. So that working relationship, that's really, really human and kind of old school. But I think that it's important because I look in his eyes and he looks at my eyes. So he knows he's getting his meat back. But he also knows that I was there, me or one of the other owners has been there every step of the way. I think that's important for food. And I said we run into vegetarians and vegans in the business all the time, or, you'll make small talk with someone at an airport and they're like, oh, what do you do? Oh, I'm a butcher. Oh, I'm a vegan. And my response is usually, I would be a vegan too. Knowing what I know about meat, I'm like, good for you. Because if I didn't do my meat, I haven't met many people who I would want having anything to do with the handling of the live animals that become my meat, or the handling of the animals as they're becoming my meat, or sort of the kind of the scammy practices that go on with meat in the counter after they are meat, just to maximize profit.
Yeah. So
it's a tough thing to sort of make efficient and make money with, but it's an important one, because when things go bad or when corners are cut with meat, it's pretty bad.
Yeah. Especially, being on the inside of this industry, we get to know a lot of the smoke and mirrors that go on very acutely, I hear you.
Really good term. Yeah. The smoke and mirrors and downcycling. I had this story that I tell my vegan friends, that thanks to the miracle of modern science and biochemical, engineering and things, what used to be dog food is now human food, and what used to be floor scrapings is now dog food. So in 50 more years, I look forward to eating like feather and kidney wieners. It's amazing that science and technology is amazing, and it can make something that had been waste into food. But there's a point at which a normal person would draw the line. Like if you knew about it, you would draw the line and say, no, that is still not food. I don't care how good you can make it taste or how safe you can make it for me to eat. That nugget, that chicken nugget or whatever that is, I know it is delicious and it's edible and it didn't make me sick. So that's pretty spectacular. But I have to draw the line that like blood-covered feathers whipped into a nugget, that's still not chicken. Or meat, meat kind of glued back together, or scab is still scab. So I think there is a line, and no matter how much kind of engineering and profit seeking we can push into it, there's some things that we probably shouldn't eat.
Part of what you're saying is some of the accountability gets lost when you get into a larger scale that is a little bit more faceless and nameless. Whereas the scale that you work at, when you're looking people in the eye and shaking hands with the farmer, and you're there's fewer people on the floor and you're first name basis with the inspector. Something that might feel immoral, it's easier to not do that thing. Whereas in maybe a more faceless or nameless kind of scale, it might be easier for people to look the other way or not even let their mind go to the natural consequence of what is happening. Possibly.
Yeah, that you summed it up really nicely. Yeah, I went on quite a verbal diarrhea there, but you're absolutely right. There's accountability. And the first name base of the inspector. So if I have a shitty stun, like I Captain stun this beef and it doesn't work out perfectly. It's not textbook, Honest to God, man, that the inspector can give me a glance, and I don't want to disappoint him. You know what I mean? Like, or I feel bad that I disappointed Dad. He's not my dad, obviously, but I feel bad. Like this father figure gives me this look, and I'm like, oh shit, and I'll get on it, right away. Can that be said of the the cattle that's not completely desensitized on the line, but the machines are already, the guys are already hooked up the winch lines to its heels, and it's being pulled apart by the machines, and the little the unfortunate worker that got a bad stun on the mega disassembly line just kind of looks the other way. No one's watching, and he would be fired or demoted or lose shifts or lose money or something like that if he said, hey, whoa, stop, that cow needs to be bled better, or it's not completely insensitive to what's going on. He would just be like, no, just look the other way. And the consumer, or even the quality of the meat at the end of that process, that worker on the kill floor of the 2,000 employee plant isn't going to be held accountable for a dark cutter or a broken hip in a pig or something, a broken femur in a pig or something like that. If the death process is hurried with a pig, or if a gate is slammed on a pig or something like that, it's not my problem. It's not my company, says the big worker in the huge plant. But me in my plant, those glances and body language between the workers and watching the pig tense up as you're dragging across the floor, it's hard not to be human in our system. And I think that it would be difficult to be human and humane as an extension in the 5,000 beef per shift system. And I think that it's important because we're dealing with sentient critters. I think creatures similar in a lot of ways to us. Because we're dealing with animals that are like us, I think that it's all we've got is to be humane. That's the most important thing at that end. And then at the other end, damn it, if you were there on the kill floor and you're making bacons and you get your ratios wrong and you put too much curing salts in the bacons, it breaks your heart that bacon is now garbage. So, so you're kind of fighting for the, on behalf of the animal that you just put a bullet in, 3 days before. You're like, man, I don't want to screw up this ham, or I don't want to screw up this bacon. And when someone gives you a cut instruction, there's like a moral debate or an ethical conversation anyway in the cut floor. Like, man, this guy only wants T-bones, and we're going to grind everything else, T-bones, and grind the rest extra lean. And I'll pick up the phone and call the guy, like, Jerry, first name, like, Jerry, come on. This is a nice beef and it died well. Are you sure you just want T-bones on this thing? Like, that's a lot of hamburger. And so that's not happening. I mean, when you've commodified meat and animals' lives, nobody cares. It's just like, well, we've got an order for so many sea cans of pork bellies in China, so who cares? They just follow the price, kind of, not what's absolutely moral or absolutely right. So I'd advocate for hundreds and hundreds of plants, one in every small every small town in an agricultural area could be staffed where folks make $50,000 to $60,000 a year. They have a good quality of life, maybe some benefits. They kind of know each other and work as part of the community. I think that's really decent.
I was going to ask you a question along the lines of what kind of solutions do you see or do you imagine as we project forward into the future here when it comes to the food system? And it sounds like you're saying many, small, and distributed was some of the words that you used.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the right way for healthy food in all categories, I think. Because we're dealing with living things, whether it's asparagus, which is better fresh out of the field and not coming on a truck for 4 days, all the way to the meats and cheeses and it kind of everything in between. Yeah, many small distributed.
Society doesn't necessarily view butchery and slaughtery work in particular as very glamorous work. And I was going to ask you, what keeps you in it, and how does slaughtery give back to you? What kind of meaning do you derive from it that keeps you feeling like, yes, this is valuable work, yes, this is meaningful work?
Precisely that I did glamour work that we were told in school that you do easy work that is glamorous. And I don't think that accounting in particular is glamorous, but work in an office tower, make a lot of money for doing very little. So I've been there, done that. It's horribly shallow. It's a facade. And the people that I met were, during that part of my life, were the most shallow, pretentious, and physically unhealthy people that I met in my life to date. So by moving away from something that we were told to want to like to do, that was glamorous and doing very little work for a lot of pay, now I'm doing a ton of work for very little pay. But the only word that I can use to describe it best is, but it's important work, the most important work, in that it's getting nutrition into the faces of people that, so getting nutrition and doing the right things with the animals that we grow, it's all important. It's critically important work, because without food, people would start starving to death. So without my accounting report, my month-end accounting analysis, no one died. It was not important work. But with this, it is sort of life or death, and important to do right. So every day you realize the importance of it, because it affects people at the most base level, and it affects them 3 to 5 times a day, however many meals that they eat. It's affecting them all the time. And then you're really in touch. So I think too that through meat, through food processing and production, you integrate into the community, like an agriculture community. I have a purpose in the community that's valued and important and integrated. Whereas when I drove off to an office tower and did the books for some capitalist, it didn't serve the community. I was just a guy who lived on that farm, on this house on this hill on this quarter section, but didn't participate in the community, wasn't involved in the goings on of the community of people that live here. I just worked for a company and brought my paycheck and spent outside the community, weirdly. But now we're, our family is integrated into not just the business, but our kids and our staff, I've encouraged to grow a few animals. It's bring my daughter's bunnies to work day today, and the bunnies' heads get twisted off, and we make them into something quite nice. And the employees, I said, well, we've got to buy pigs. We have a few restaurant customers, a few wholesale customers. The phone rings sometimes, and someone wants a custom pig or custom beef, and it's my duty to recommend who we buy the beef from. And so I know good producers that treat their animals well, that look nice after they've gone through the saw. So I'll recommend those guys. But then I say to the young people working for us, you live on your family farm, and we'd love to move some of your lambs. So, have you got any lambs ready? So we've sort of started a kind of a bizarre culture of, maybe we don't pay that great, but if you grow a few livestock at home, they'll definitely get sold up through the shop, because I know you and you know me, and we have similar values, and we can. There's no better way to custom grow a lamb than if the kid that grew the lamb works with you 5 days a week, and he understands the plight of what the restaurant customer wants or what the buyer wants. So we're spawning these little businesses on the side, just by being involved in the community, being decent, and giving a shit. And I think that's way more important than your local mega chain grocer. What do they care how much bologna they sell? It's all just numbers to those guys.
What's it like to be doing creative work and educational work about the killing of animals in a society that has difficult facing death and talking about death? Your Instagram account also would be an example of creative work that you put forward to the community that is about the killing of animals. And then your work with From the Wild is kind of a TV series look at mostly kind kind of hunting food procurement type of killing of animals. I'm aware that it can be very difficult to talk about and show the killing of animals to a society that likes to keep that hidden. Can you speak to any challenges you've had along the way with that, or how you've navigated being an educator in that kind of a landscape?
That's a really good question, a multi-part question. Society in the last 50 or 100 years, certainly the last 50 years, has gotten away from growing up on the farm and sort of being in direct contact with primary production and where all the stuff that we eat and consume comes from. So without a doubt, we're always concerned whether it's at the meat shop, in the slaughterhouse, and taking lambs from the 4-H sale and having all the little kids that grew them. 4-H is this, it's a program, Junior Learn How to Farm. So kids on family farms grow an animal. The animal is judged at an annual auction. The animals are auctioned off, and then they come to the slaughterhouse and get killed. But these animals, the kids have been grooming them and fluffing them and keeping them clean, so they're kind of pets. And these little farm kids' first taste of death is when the slaughterman comes to the 4-H sale, and they take these perfectly groomed animals that are sold to local area businesses, and then we load them into a trailer and then take them to the slaughterhouse. And these kids are crying. And it's an important lesson in rural life. That's still happening in a small scale in rural life. Fewer and fewer families are raising livestock or are staying rural, but it's important, and kids get that exposure. But yeah, where I grew up in the city, a city of 1 million people in Edmonton, Alberta, there wasn't as much exposure to that. So we have a lot of friends that can't believe what we do. So I found it important to share through Instagram to record, almost like in a diary, to record sort of the sorts of things that I do and the sorts of things that I've learned throughout this journey for 8 years of owning a slaughterhouse, and before that hunting, and I still do a lot of fishing and hunting, and even the pictures of stuff that happens on the farm, so that our city friends that we're really close with can sort of get a glimpse into the world of the animals. Little piglets are born, they're cute as hell, they turn into adolescents, they're aggressive and mean, and then they get loaded and turned into lovely bacons. And that's the part that nobody likes, is the turning into bacons. But I think that it's quasi important, or it's very important to me to show people that I care about. And I realize that those accounts and those pictures are accessible by the public. We're not jamming anything down anyone's throats, though. I haven't gone. What do you call that? And on Instagram, you can be a private, so that only certain people can see your photos. And it's still these accounts and these stories are public stories and public accounts, and so we always approach them with respect and with dignity, so that even this conversation, it's obviously important to those of us who are in the industry and care. It's important to tell the story and to do things well. And it's unfortunate, even if I happen to be vegetarian or a vegan, I think that the most important thing that we can do is attract people that care about animals and the integrity of the food system, and the decommodification of things is important as living organisms that we need, or that a lot of us need. The most important thing a vegan or vegetarian could do would be to buy a slaughterhouse, for the humane handling of animals, for the treatment, and for reducing waste in the food stream, because you have to acknowledge that meat's going to happen whether you personally like it or not. There's a majority of society wants products from animals, and so the biggest advocate for animal rights should be a slaughterhouse owner. And then they would very quickly, if they're rational, I think, if they're just basically rational, you'd see that large, mega-scale, profit-oriented and profit-prioritized, so corporately owned scale slaughterhouses, probably not the best idea. Being disconnected from the communities in which they serve, being irresponsible or not held responsible, or accountability is all out the window for those big corporations. So it does come back to that the sensitive work we shouldn't hide our children and our childlike adults from. That blood happens to pulse through the veins of things that don't only exist in video games, and that Snack Witch and that Baconator and all of this shit that's crammed down your face through marketing comes from living animals at some point, and someone's got to do that work, and so someone's doing that work, and the big commodified industries put walls up, and they do their best to keep it out of the public eye. And I think that us little guys, it's sort of our job not to be preachy and not to be shoving it in people's faces that don't want to know or see. But I think that if you talk to me for any amount of time, or people that really care in the industry of meat, they would say that you should probably have a look, probably just get a general understanding of the process, because then you might make different choices at the supermarket. You might make slightly better choices. So if I tell a story at a dinner party about what goes into wieners and how spectacular it is, of the sorts of things that you can put into hot dogs, then someone might think about learning how to braise and buy maybe a less expensive cut and learn how to braise it, rather than leaving it up to the chemical plant to decide what's going to go into your hot dog or your chicken nugget. So it's important work. That's the thing. It comes back to even telling the story at personal risk at sometimes. And there's a story if you look at any From the Wild episodes in the series, in season 3, I think somewhere around episode 12, the episode's called Protest. And this is where or The Protest, we took some bear meat that we had harvested in some Canada goose, and we had a restaurant dinner in Edmonton at a popular little bistro called the Three Boars. And there were when it sort of the realest it's ever come, the most reaction that we've had was there were picketers protesting, like animal rights advocates protesting, waving placards outside the restaurant while we were having a dinner. I think there was maybe 50 covers or 70 covers came in, and we prepared like a 5-course meal with guest chefs, and we did black bear and Canada goose. And the people picketing outside, like, I'm sure they're nice, rational people, but they thought that the Canada goose was endangered, and they were waving cards that said stuff like "Your food fetish is not for our wildlife," and we just thought about all the irony and sort of misinformation and miseducation that these people are drinking hot chocolate outside, waving their placards saying that your food fetishist behavior is disgusting. And we're eating a black bear that's indigenous to Alberta. One of the female organizers from Slow Food International, Edmonton Convivium, is a First Nations descent. So we're eating First Nations food, and we're eating these geese, of which there are trillions on the planet, and they're drinking hot chocolate, and they're waving these placards saying that we're food fetish weirdos, and we're glamorizing death. And I don't know, that was sort of like this poignant moment that we had done something important, because we had attracted these dinner guests who sort of really got they really felt the philosophy, because they're willing to try these indigenous foods that we'd harvested ourselves with our hands. So they sort of got why that food was valuable. And then outside you have these people thinking that fighting for the rights of black bears and geese means that advocating that we don't eat those things. And there are these bizarre breeds of cattle that we have in Alberta, and nonsensical forms of pigs that don't belong here, and all of those things aren't being picketed. I said to Kevin, get your camera and film I want, just as a snapshot for a still to frame on my wall, a picture of these people with their signs that say your food fetish is not not for our wildlife or whatever. And then in the background, I want the golden arches of McDonald's in the background, because across the street there was a McDonald's restaurant. And so they're picketing Three Boars, who, this independently owned restaurant, we're friends with the owners, and we're eating something that's from the local area environment, of which there are lots of these things to eat. And we collected them with our own hands, and we looked in their eyes and said, time for you to go, time for us to make some beautiful food. And here these people are picketing us, and in the background are the golden arches of McDonald's with their McRib and their McBurgers and their McJunk food. And it's just so weird. It was just an interesting. We knew then that we were doing the right thing. So Kevin got it. The owners of the restaurant got it. Like, are we ever doing the right thing? That society is so confused. They're picketing us, and there's a multinational corporation that's exploiting from the tomatoes and lettuce workers in California to the pork producers on contract. They're getting shafted on price because we met these guys that produce for the mega chains and the multinational distribution model of meat and food. Those pigs do not belong in the human food chain. The sorts of pigs that that would be sold on price only. We know all about them. I could tell horror stories for hours and hours about the sorts of pigs that we would sometimes get bookings for from the local pig mega barns. And I wouldn't feed those pigs to my dog. I think that even my dog deserves better food than a lot of the commodified food that's built around profit only. That's price and capturing the maximum amount of money only. But yeah, so I know it's a long-winded answer, but that moment when protesters and picketers, it just showed how dysfunctional our food system has become, and that people have heart, and they want to do the right thing, and they want to advocate for the animal rights and the best that they know, and yet there's there's just been so much wool pulled over their eyes, and it's been blanketed and covered for so long, it's been hidden for so long, that they think that the most genuine and authentic food experience possible is what they should be picketing, when the least genuine and authentic food experience across the street at McDonald's restaurant that's just background.
Do you see your work with From the Wild being a part of that conversation, coming in to bring some of the attention to food and where we get our food from? And in general, how did you get involved with that project, and what are some of your guys' overarching goals, or maybe some of your personal goals with that project?
Oh yeah, it was a real mind blower. That Kevin Koswan, I ran into him at a food event called Indulgence. So it was local area producers and processors paired with restaurants in the Edmonton scene. So it was quite a nice highbrow black tie event. And Kevin Koswan was a local food video logger, and he was just telling the story of food that he wanted to know about, how food was produced and processed and things in the local area. So he had quite a following of people that watched his stuff and read his stuff and listened to his stuff, and they really trusted him. So we met at this food event, and he said that I introduced myself as a slaughterist and a new slaughterhouse owner. That was probably like 6 years ago. And he said, would you mind if I bring my camera to the kill floor or to your slaughterhouse and do some filming? And I talked with my other partner, the partner at the slaughterhouse, Kevin Meyer, and we sort of said, well, we've either got to drop our pants or build a wall. We can go one of two ways: the ways of the corporate federal, build walls and keep it a big secret, or we just sort of make it public and hope for the best. And we weren't making any scads of money at all, so we thought, why not give this Kevin Koswan guy a chance and have him bring his cameras. So he came and he filmed a kill day with our then inadequate animal handling equipment and setup, and he's since filmed another kill day sequence at the plant since we've sort of changed our handling system, and it's amazing just to look at both films. But he told the story of the slaughterhouse initially, and that's how we got to know each other. And he told it so well that when he mounted this stuff to his fan base, his viewers watched it, and we were waiting for some sort of horrendous flack. But the way that he edited it and the words that we said and the way that we managed the content of that video of the kill floor, people really in his community, followers, really responded well. There were no death threats, thankfully. There was really nothing negative came from that. So we did a few series of things together, a few videos together for his kevinkoswan.com and Kev TV, which is sort of his channel of little videos. So that was early on. We did some on-farm processing. We slaughtered a pig with a group of people. We did some workshops, pork butchery workshop. We did on-farm killing of a beef and then skinned it and gutted it and then cut it up. So some really kind of edgy stuff. But then Kevin came up with this idea. He said, I have this idea called From the Wild. Are you interested? And it's wherein we go 12 times a year. We go out into the bush and we get some food there. And then we sometimes bring chefs or guests, producers and processors, and we put up a nice dish or two with the things that we find in nature. I'm like, wow, that's a level of authentic and genuine connection to food that goes beyond the slaughterhouse, because you're not raising it, you're not interfering with it. You're just taking what nature gives, what nature provides. Just take what's there and make something beautiful out of it, and sort of dispelling. For me, it was like an opportunity to dispel the myths that wild game is sort of second-rate table fare. That wild game could be better than anything at any high-end restaurant that you would eat, if you just simply give a few, care a bit in the handling of the things that you harvest, the collection of them, and then the preparation. So From the Wild, that's 48 episodes ago. So that's 48 3-day trips to the boreal or the mountains or the coast. We even went to Sweden to hunt moose. We were lucky enough to go to Sweden to hunt some moose one time. So yeah, that's really makes my heart sing, because it's several levels of connection deeper. We've just gone deeper into our food system than having a farm and growing some bizarre livestock breeds that aren't indigenous to this area at all. Now we go and collect a moose, and then we make something beautiful out of the moose. And we built a really cool. There's a following. There's people that watch it, and that's really, really cool. And we interact with them. And but we've really connected with it with sort of local chefs and food sort of philanthropists have come on the show or watched the show or so the community that we built around that are like, people that are even more genuine than just livestock producers. So they care at a different level. And then and recently, like last week, the series was nominated for a James Beard Foundation Award, and that's happening here. So we're nominated for the category of documentary film on location, and we're going in April to New York City for the award ceremony. And it'd be great to win, but just the nod from an institution that's as important as the James Beard Foundation to say that, hey, you guys are doing something as important is both humbling and then gratifying. And it immediately made me as a character in that series think about how we can push to do even more ridiculous things, but not for the purpose of show, but like how many more levels can we go, how much deeper can we get with local food? So it's not just like kill a moose and take out its tenderloin and put it on a fire. That was like so last season. And this season it's like I want every herb and every flavor and everything in the pot in a complex dish should be from the boreal. Can we do that? Can we, so this season we're putting up a lot more plates per episode, but then we're also grabbing our flavors from the ecosystem that we're in. And it's been a wild ride because I've hunted all my life, but I never thought about eating cattails. I never thought about pine tar and that resin and what sort of flavors you can get out of it. Pine needles as a rosemary replacement. So, these sorts of things, yarrow and rose hips and all these other bizarre, there's a cornucopia of flavors in the boreal forest in this ecology that sort of belong together with the meats and fishes that are harvested and fungi that are all harvested there. And they pair really well together because they're all in the same environment. You just have to learn which ones which ones and how to treat them to get the most out of them, and which ones are going to poison you to death. So far, so good.
Do you have a favorite episode on From the Wild? Or is that too hard a question?
I do. No, I do, and it changes. It's the most recent one. It's always the most recent one because we seem to be evolving and getting better with each episode. So it's sort of more food, more integrated, more interesting, and exploring in a deeper way. So the first ones, I look at season 1 and just think, we didn't know what we were doing. But we're only just finding our feet now. So the most recent one is always my favorite.
Solid. One strategy you employ to stay healthy during the busy season, or just times when your work is really slammed, is there any just kind of basic thing you come back to?
For sure. I would say that coincidentally, doing this From the Wild filming, but we didn't have to be filming. I think getting away on average 3 days a month and just being in nature. So the absolute stillness and quiet and sort of the vibe and the smells of the forest are, it's not kids, the noise of a busy family. It's not the noise of a busy farm, and it's not the Jarvis well saw or the backpacker. So just getting away in nature and just being still and calm with yourself. I think that's the most important. I've lately been going to the local town. There's a new swimming pool, and there's a similar feeling sitting in just a hot tub at a public swimming pool, and I just sort of zone out. I prefer it to be in nature, sitting on a cut line, waiting for a deer to walk across the cut line or something like that. But I would say that nature it's held my hand through the difficult times, as well as family. But as, my wife and kids, all of that for sure. But to get away and sort of cope, I really like just sitting still, ice fishing. And whether we catch anything or not, I think there's some sort of healing going on just being in the quiet and in your own thoughts.
What kind of splitting saw do you use?
Ooh, a Jarvis Buster number 4, I think. That's the splitting saw. It's got a counterweight. It hangs from the ceiling. It's like a Jarvis Buster, or maybe it's a 6. We recently bought it, like within 2 years, I guess.
Uh-huh.
So it's a monster. And yeah, it's one of the most terrifying pieces of equipment that we have, because if you can split a carcass in, under a minute down the spine, then if your thigh accidentally gets in the way, you're going to cut your leg off in 1 second. So yeah, it's impressive.
We'll keep going with equipment. Do you wear any protective equipment, gloves or chainmail aprons or things like that?
Funny. In the early days, no, nothing. Recently, probably the last year or two, nitro gloves got really popular in the cut room, and a couple guys I worked with were wearing nitro a lot on the kill floor. Just nitro gloves, that's it. And plastic aprons in the kill floor, and polyester aprons in the cut room. Recently, I had my first experience with a blood infection. I got barely a scratch on my knuckle from a beef spine bone that was just hanging in the aging cooler. And that night, I had weird pink tracer lines going up my arm. So I went to the hospital, and he's like, "You've got a blood infection." And I was on intravenous antibiotics for 5 days, which was horrible. Man. All of it was scary because I've been injured really badly before, but never had an infection that needed antibiotic treatment. So since then, I wear nitro gloves on my hands, and on my left hand, my off knife hand, my gripping hand, I've got a woven like a slash-proof glove, and I was really jamming on it, and I really liked it because it was grippy, it was tactile, so I could pull with it, and I called it the Power Glove. Like a reference to Nintendo Entertainment Systems had a Power Glove back in the day. But anyway, it was cool. I felt impervious. When the glove is off, though, and you still behave as recklessly with your left hand, you're going to get hurt. And so there's a trade-off. Also, after you've had it for a few days and you don't fully wash it each time, it smells like the worst thing on the planet. Like, so I'll bleach it and roll it, launder it, and take it out, and it still smells like an old hockey or gym bag. It's disgusting. So I'd wear more protective equipment if they could. We had chainmail gloves and everybody hated them. They're pinchy and cold. They just suck the heat out of your hands and they'd pinch. So this woven stuff is good, but we need to figure out a way to clean it properly. Chainmail aprons, no. I think that's cool. It'd be cool to be able to afford to buy that stuff, but we can't. So
yeah,
people get hurt. They learn from stabbing themselves.
Gotcha.
I do have a knife scabbard. On kill days I have a knife scabbard, and it can hang on your hip, but I hang it between my legs, and quite a few times that scabbard is protected my junk from like a definite slash, stab, or a hoof. Oh yeah,
perfect.
It's funny because you shouldn't wear it like that. It's like some sort of Scottish decoration, but it protects my privates. And once in a while, you'll just hear this dunk, and it's my knife hitting my scabbard, and that would have gone through and hit me in the nuts. So I'm glad to have my scabbard.
Yeah.
To just wear a cup, pretty much.
It sounds like a very useful innovation there. Nice. You got to protect the junk. We should have started with that. That's right. We got to start and end with protecting the junk. It's very important. Okay, so just a couple more here. A trend in the meat world that you find annoying.
The trend in the meat world that I find annoying is that butchery maybe in some areas in the cities kind of is getting to be in style. So you have people that don't know what they're doing, but they're using social media platforms and self-promotion to really come across like they do. And I don't think it's really doing a service for the industry, the trade, or really for the meat or the meat animals. So I call those guys that are, last week they were in graphic design and collecting tattoos as a profession, and this week they're a self-proclaimed, self-professed butcher. I call them portioners. I'd love to enter that into the vernacular for those of us who have devoted some of our life to this business. Portioners portion. And I think that it's offensive that these people that maybe don't take it as seriously or as genuinely as some of us do, they just get into it because it's cool and it's hip. I call them portioners, not butchers. I think you have to earn your butcher stripes in the form of scars, and it's measured in years, not in number of Instagram poster or number of tattoos of pigs being dissected. Of the primal cuts on that tattoo. Right. It's fine. It's a fine tattoo. I considered it myself being a butcher, but I don't really want to pay someone to hurt me because I hurt myself enough for free. So I'm not a big tattoo guy, but those butcher style tattoos that a lot of portioners are getting just drive me nuts in a certain way because they haven't bled like I've bled.
Yeah.
Like those of us who are just in the industry have bled for it.
Yeah.
So I work at a grocery store and I cut a hunk of meat into smaller hunks. So therefore I'm a badass butcher. Look at my tattoos. Look at my knife collection. They collect the really, really expensive knives that are completely impractical doing any kind of deboning or kill floor work. Anyway, so it just kind of takes the authenticity out of the trade for me.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Any last thoughts or advice for some of the young guys who are interested in pursuing a mentoring or an apprenticeship kind of scenario and are trying to build their skill set? Any advice for wannabe butchers and young aspiring butchers?
Yeah, I think that's the same with a lot of trades. The advice would be the same, and that's that always be humble. Always be willing to learn and forever be a student. It's not going to be easy. It's physically brutal, physically demanding, and it's hard psychologically, I think, as well. But it's worth it because the work that you'll be doing is important work, and you're feeding. Never forget you're feeding families, and that's the whole purpose for all of this. So doing a good job can really make someone's day when they go to prepare a meal. You're in touch with those people. You have an intimate relationship with your customers, and you're in touch with them doing that important work.
Solid. Jeff, where can people find you to contact you with questions, comments, also anything you want to plug?
Yeah, for sure. There's a film, so you get to meet Jeff Senger, a film called Kill Day, and if you Google Kill Day, it's an award-winning film. We won this runner-up prize at Devour, this food film festival in Nova Scotia. So Kill Day, if you Google that, you can watch a film that Kevin put together, and it's all just about the kill floor. It's a 5-minute short kind of documentary kind of thing, but I wrote it and spoke in it and picked the music and everything, and Kevin filmed it. So that's a really nice way to get your feet wet. I totally plug www.fromthewild.ca. That's our From the Wild film series. There are 4 seasons, and we're currently filming season 5, so you can watch a lot of half-hour episodes. Ultimately, that site leads you to Vimeo, and Vimeo is who hosts and the episodes, and they're about $3 a piece. That basically covers our gas to go and collect things from the wild. But you can watch all the trailers and kind of get a feel for what we do in From the Wild at fromthewild.ca. And then to get a hold of me, I'm hard to get a hold of. There's Sangudo Meats, or Sangudo Custom Meat Packers in Sangudo, Alberta. It's in the phone book and on Google, but has no website. And I think the youngsters that work with us did build a Facebook page that isn't awesome. It hasn't got a lot of information, so I don't know if I'd suggest that. But to see what I'm up to, the best way to contact me is probably through direct message on Instagram. And my handle is @Jeff_Senger, Senger, on Instagram.
Jeff, thanks so much, man. Thanks a lot for chatting with me.
Thanks for having me. Well, good. We'll keep it up, and I'll come back anytime you need hours and hours of someone talking.
Great.
You're short of.
And thanks again. I mean, congrats for the James Beard nomination, man. That's just amazing. So have a good trip there when you go to New York.
Biggest.
Yeah.
There's no way it won't be good.
Yeah.
It'll be a good trip.
Awesome.
Cool.
All right, Jeff. Well,
nice meeting you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. Cool.
Yeah, we'll talk again.
Well, I got these crazy dreams, just don't know what they mean. Sometimes I dream so loud, wakes up dead folks underground, hatches baby birds, it shakes them on down, makes the weeping willow trees cry themselves brown. Let them break your bones, don't let them take your soul. Fill your heart up, let it explode, don't let it turn cold. The only thing that I recall as a witness to the slaughter was the muddy and bloody water and the farmer's youngest daughter, covered in blood and feathers, playing with the dead rabbit. She smiled like a centerfold, reached out saying, come and get it.
What up, meatheads? It's Travis, American Butcher again. And that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Meat Block Podcast. I just want to say big thanks to Ryan and a bigger thanks, or a equally big thanks, to Jeff. And if you want to get a hold of Ryan, he is at Gather and Break on Instagram. And if you want to get a hold of Jeff, he is Jeff_SENGER on Instagram. And please head over to his page and check it out. There is some beautiful work there. And if you want to get a hold of us in general, you could email us at themeatblockpodcast@gmail.com. You could tweet us at themeatblockpod. We're on Instagram at themeatblock. And also we have a Facebook group, The Meat Block. And there's good conversation happening over there. And I say that every week. And it's mostly me over there asking questions. So, and I would like you guys to, if you're listening to this, head over there and engage. I love it. I want people to interact and whatnot. And then please send your retail horror stories. We're still, compiling them. And that's going to be very exciting. If you want to get a hold of me, I am at American Butcher on Instagram and Facebook. And until next time, keep your knife sharp and live in the margin.
His dying words were befriend a man who can settle for less. But beware the poor creature who'll kill for the best. But I say, let him break your bones, don't let him take your soul. Fill your heart up, let it explode, don't let it turn cold. He fished tulips, she bled a rose. I cried stinging metal. We were all at ground zero, waiting for the dust to settle. She said, I'm a morning glory, won't you open me slowly? He said, I'm a dandelion, so come over here and blow me. Let him break your bones, don't let him take your soul. Fill your heart up, let it explode, don't let it turn cold. She was standing in a darkened doorway, wearing nothing but a Cuban guitar. strap wrapped over her shoulders. She was sucking an electric cigar. She said, "Why are you so quiet? If you don't believe in silence." I cried, "Why is my nose broken? If you don't believe in violence." Let 'em break your bones. Don't let 'em take your soul. Fill your heart up, let it explode. Don't let it turn cold. I say, let 'em break your bones. Don't let 'em take your soul.